Hi, welcome to this video. In this, I would like to talk about how one could go about learning opening in chess. Opening is one of the three phases of a chess game and can be very overwhelming for a beginner. So, there are a couple of tips, tricks, pointers that I wanted to give you that will make this journey a little bit easier. So one of the best resources available for you to go learn opening is Lichess. And if you go to Lichess and you can create an account if you don't have one, you can go to tools and there is a tab called openings. Clicking on this will allow you to start understanding openings. But I also understand that this can be very overwhelming if you're doing it without the right framework, right reference frame in your mind. So the purpose of this video is to actually allow you a handful of reference frames that can make it a little bit easier for you to understand how these openings manifest themselves in chess and how you can go about learning it. All right, so let's think about a framework in the first place. Why do we need a framework? A framework just makes life a little easier because it creates a mental model about understanding literally million possible openings that's there in chess. So the framework that I like to use is all games in chess are kind of going to be in a spectrum. Right? On one end of the spectrum is going to be the list of openings that are going to eventually lead to positions that make the board look empty. And this is what I would like to call as open. It looks open. And the other end of the spectrum is where you have openings that lead to middle games where the board is very crowded. You know, the number of exchanges are very less and you don't have open lines. Things are jammed up. It's kind of very crowded. This is what I would like to call as closed. Right? Now, obviously, you have the entire range because not every opening is going to be only open or only closed. It's not binary. The world of chess is not binary. You are going to have a range here. So, in fact, I would say the range is going to look something like this, where you would have openings that do fall on the open side of the world, but they're not completely open. These are the openings we call as semi-open. And these are the openings which fall more on the closed side, but still are somewhere in between. These are what I would call as semi-closed. So in other words, every single opening that is there, good, bad, regular, and irregular, needs to fall into one of these four buckets. It's either an open game, a semi-open game, a semi-closed game, or a closed game. So this is a reference frame with which you will be able to understand it a little better. I use a framework called MISI. MISI stands for mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, which means I'm putting all of the openings possible, a million possible openings in chess, and I'm saying that collectively they're exhaustive because they're going to fall into one of these four categories. However, the key here is they're not mutually exclusive. There's always going to be a debate around some opening that could either be classified as semi-open and semi-closed, but doesn't matter. But as long as you're collectively exhaustive, that's good enough. Every rule in chess will always have an exception. Every complex system, not just chess, every complex system in the world is going to follow collective exhaustion, yes, but not necessarily mutually exclusive. All right. Now, why do we need this classification? How does it help? It's quite simple. Every open game begins with e4, e5. Okay, as I said, there are exceptions to it. A game can begin with something else but end up with an open state. Yes, but openings leading to open games typically is going to be e4, e5. And similarly, everything that's going to start with d4, the response can be d5 or nf6, doesn't matter, typically leads to close games. Semi-open games are ones where white plays e4, but black plays anything other than e5. Anything other than e5. you get to semi-open. And semi-closed games is when white starts off neither with e4 nor with d4, but any other possible game. So now I hope that this gives you an idea. So whenever a game begins with e4, e5, those are open games. Whenever a game begins with e4 but black responds with anything other than e5, that's semi-open. Whenever the game begins with d4, that's closed, and anything other than e4 and d4 to be started would be a semi-closed game. So this is the framework that should help you think about openings. Now that you have the framework, what do you do with it? You can go to openings and in Lichess, and there are multiple ways of visualizing or viewing this data. So the first default view is that of a picture, because it's going to be very easy for you to understand. So the e4 is the king's pawn game, where you can see that the pawn in front of the king has been moved twice. On the left, you would see these percentages. It basically tells you that amongst the game that has been considered here. Now, what is a filter criteria? You can click on this. It says it's considering bullet, ultra bullet, blitz. Now, you don't want to look at bullet and ultra bullet, so click that out. Let's pick up maybe blitz and rapid and look at anything within your rating range. Now, let's say you're a beginner, so you're 1000 to 1400, and you say submit. Now this will tell you that typically 66% of all the games that is started by beginners between the rating range of 1000 and 1400 starts with e4. 22% starts with d4, queen's pawn game, which is the closed game. Right? Just between the two of them, 88% of all games is covered. Now the remaining is going to get split between multiple other semi-closed games, which is English opening starting with c4, Zukertort starting with nf3, so on and so forth. Right? So these are all the other openings, which typically, combined form 12% of all possible openings. Now, what about the percentages that's there on the left of the board? So the 50% that you see here tells that 50% of the time white wins, 46% of the time black wins, and there's 4% of the times when the game ends in a draw. This should give you an idea of which game you want to choose to make a play, kind of decide your strategy. Now, going through these images will be definitely one way for you to help out. Now, you can drill further into it. Now, clicking on e4 goes to king's pawn, and then further you'll be able to see all the other options here. For example, e4, e5, which is the open game, which happens 56% of the times within e4. And you can start understanding the details within that, right? And e6 is the French defense. So you can click on French defense and you can actually go further and start understanding all the variations within, which is the normal variation, the knight's variation, the queen's knight variation, so on and so forth, right? And you could also click on train with puzzles, where you can specifically go and train with the French defense. So this is a game which would have started with French defense and finally arrived at this position where now it is a puzzle. And you can train yourself to think about it. And as you can see, this is a discovered attack puzzle. You capture the bishop and then you capture the free knight. Right? So while this puzzle is not about openings, but you can actually start helping your brain connect the dots from how an opening leads to certain middle games, which has certain puzzles that you can play around with. Now, the other option that you have when you start off is to go into a name tree. And this will allow you to directly jump into a particular opening, like French Benoni, and you can go further deep into it. So this is basically a name search. You could also search directly here by typing in French and see all the possible relative opening that comes in here. Okay. Getting back, Explorer is the other option, where you can see all of this data on the right hand side. So for example, here, I can go to Lichess and I can set the same standards where I just want no correspondence but these two, and I want it only for this particular rating range, and see the stats That 66% of it starts with e4, 22% starts with d4, right? So use the framework that I taught you, which is basically open, semi-open, semi-closed, and closed. Use Lichess opening to go and look at these data for just, even if you're not playing these games, look at these data to understand what's popular, what people use, how many games have happened with this particular one. And at least you can try and learn the most popular one. So for example, if I were to learn the most popular one, I would go with e4, which has the most popular response, which is e5. As you can imagine, it's an open game. Knight f3 responded with knight c6. bc4, which is the Italian game. Knight f6, which is the two knights defense. Knight g5, turning this into the knight attack or the fried liver. So this is the most common opening that you want to see, because high probability that you will be seeing this particular opening. And also understand that how does one defend against it, d5 being the defense for the fried liver attack. I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button and click on the bell icon in case you haven't, for regular insightful videos on chess that will help you improve your thought process, your thinking skills, and your chess skills. Thank you so much.